All right, I'm going to go ahead and start kicking things off. I said I'd do that like 2 minutes ago. We're going to do that for real now. This is somebody actually asked me to cover this question. They said it's something that Meta covers, and I know Meta's actually hiring right now, so I imagine guys would appreciate it if I covered it. This is all that I was given. It's the classic privacy visibility controls question. Maybe there was better details about it on Google. I guess Meta does kind of stick with specific templates a little bit more, but in general, at other companies like Amazon and Google, usually an interviewer will make a system design question their own, as opposed to at other companies, or as opposed to how it is with coding questions, where you basically just like memorize the find duplicate solution, and everyone's going to ask the question the same exact way. Usually with system design, there's variation in how somebody will ask the exact same question. So the way I ask somebody Ticketmaster might be different than how somebody in a different department might ask. Within the same company, somebody in a different department might ask Ticketmaster and have a very different expectation for it. So that's why I'm going to do a couple of different variations to kind of cover your bases and just kind of show some different ways that you can kind of explore the problem. So like I said, it wasn't clear if we were talking about account details or posts. Posts is definitely going to be a lot harder. Also, I know that on Facebook, so when I first started using Facebook, they only had, oh, there it is. This was profile versus newsfeed when I was saying that requirement for the first variation is that it's either your profile details of your account as opposed to like your newsfeed of your posts, like when you make a post, and whether the privacy controls are on that specifically. I know that was actually kind of like a newer feature of Facebook back when it was kind of popular around, I don't know, like 2013 to 2017, I think that came out, where you could actually do privacy level on individual posts. So we are going to try and do that. Also, you had more granularity of control as opposed to just doing public, friends, or private, as in only me. This is how it was public versus friends versus only me. You can see this. There was actually custom groups introduced, and I am actually even going to try to do that. And of course, it's going to be harder, so we're going to leave it to a little bit later. So it's just, hey, a user should be able to set the privacy or visibility of some aspect of their account, and other users will only be able to see what they have permission for. Yeah, I don't see any other questions, so we can go ahead and try to get started with our first variation. We're going to do that, and it's going to be, it is the account view. It's the account details view that you're controlling access of, so like your birthday, or your education or relationship status. And it's also going to be, we're going to start off with just simple public versus friends style of privacy. Granularity. Okay, so that's our first one that we're going to do. We're going to have two. So there's two requirements that's going to correspond to two little boxes that I'm going to have for those two different points of interacting with the system. So it's going to be the browser for the account owner, setting a permission. And you're going to have the browser for the viewer, like that. Let's zoom out a little bit. We're going to make this extra large. I'm trying to be very conscious of making sure you guys can actually view this stuff. I used to be really bad at that. So we got that. We're going to need a backend for both. This is going to be the permissions service. And we're also going to have, oh, the text is actually fairly long for that. There we go. So we got the permission service, and then we're going to call it the viewer service. I know that Facebook has GraphQL. They kind of invented GraphQL, I think. Don't quote me on that. I've said wrong stuff before. If I was a lot more familiar with it, I'd be able to go into more detail about how that could be a useful thing here. and they've oh man, they've had some really crazy bugs with how permissions works. The guy that asked this wanted me to talk about authentication and authorization. You know what? I'm even going to go ahead and copy paste that just so that I can kind of go over it a little bit. So authorization is something you really want to have on the back end. If you do any kind of permissions or viewability controls on the front end, that opens you up to hacking. So it's really important that you have your visibility controls doing the suppression of account details on the back end side, and not just going ahead and passing all the details to the front and then filtering it out in some kind of JavaScript on the front end. That's kind of that's a naive approach. Actually, we can even go ahead and list that out as a naive approach when we have enough stuff drawn. So you're gonna have a request. It's gonna come in, and we're gonna have some kind of database for where we're gonna have. Okay, so there's the account. Yeah, the profile details database. We're gonna have this thing called the profile details DB. Okay, so the request comes in, and you're setting some kind of permission on your profile details, and then you get your response back from the database. It says 200 OK. We successfully changed it, and then it sends a response back, and that's going to change something in this database. So let's talk about the schema of it a little bit, and then we can go ahead and talk about how it's going to look on the viewer service. So what I'm imagining for one of the ways that we can represent the account details is that we can have each field could actually be a separate record in the database, and then you would just have you'd be doing like a key range query of your user ID. So we're going to say that the user is, I'm going to use my Discord username, and then we're going to have some kind of detail like birthday. So maybe you don't want to have that as a public detail because if it's public, that can actually be used for like phishing or for certain ways you're able to guess social security numbers apparently. And then we're going to have the value for it. And for my value, we're going to do something goofy. Let's say 1990 04 20. So 420 1990. Okay, and we're going to have the visibility on it, the visibility setting that you would be able to tweak, and we're going to have it set to friends. Okay, public versus, I'm looking at the chat, public versus friends versus only me plus friends of friends or longer dag. Friends of friends would be, that one, you know what, that could even be a something extra that we get to towards the end. That would actually make it even harder, because then you would have to do that really fancy fan out that we talked about in, that one would have, actually, that, I guess that wouldn't be too hard. We did talk about how to do friends of friends before. It's just that it requires that extra fan out when you're adding connections. But I was thinking in terms of special groups that you manually set individual people of, as opposed to friends of friends, where it's kind of like automated, and every time you add a connection, it's going to do this fan out trick. And I can talk about that later on. This is maybe more of an agenda than variations. So we're gonna say agenda. We're gonna go ahead and copy paste this, because that's more of an agenda item to cover than variations. We're going to start with just the variations. Okay, so I got the schema, and so there's one, and for example, if you wanted to have another detail that you're controlling, such as education, and we're going to say that I'm educated at the nearby state school of University of Washington, and that one is going to be public info. I'm going to let anybody know about that, because it'll be easier for people a little bit more distantly connected to me to find me a little bit easier, while they don't need to know my birthday to locate me. So you'll notice that so in order to get all the details of a profile, I'm imagining that the detail is going to be part of this response that is just going to get mapped into the web page on the front end. You're not just going to get it all as one singular JSON object. It's okay that it's several records. You just have some magic strings here for these values. Or you can even go ahead and map it into a JSON blob on the back end as opposed to mapping these individual records into a singular thing in the React.js code or whatever it is that you're using. Again, this is a key range query, and so we don't really want to do scatter gather here. That would make it pretty bad. That would be bad for performance. So instead, we want to make sure that we're serving all these records off of a singular singular partition. So our partition key is going to be the user here. So that way, when you're doing that key range query, all the records just come off of one node. You don't have to do scatter gather. And then we can go ahead and use this as the sort key, just like that. And so that should make it pretty easy. Okay, and so then we're going to have the viewer. They're trying to view somebody's specific account. So then they have the request come in. They're looking for a specific user. They want to see my account. We're going to make a call to this. It's going to return all the details. And so let's say that they're not a friend. Actually, that's right. I do need to have, I need to be able to figure out whether or not they're a friend. So actually, you can't make this request right away. You need to have, we're going to call it the connections DB, or I think I had, we'll call it the relation DB. That sounds like relationship, but it's like follower, followee on Twitter. And that's where we're going to store the friend connections. So we're also going to need to have another thing here, and it's going to be user ubidasu. Then we're going to have the other person. We're going to call it connection, and we'll pick a random person from the Discord. We're going to say it's this person, or we can say let's say Albert Einstein is on Facebook and I'm friends with him. So we're going to start with just the basic user versus friends. We're not going to have the custom group, so it's going to be really simple like this. And if we wanted to be able to do this lookup really efficiently, so we're first going to want to know whether or not we're friends. Actually, we could even call it the friends DB. We'll leave it as relation DB to make it more flexible for how we're going to modify this later when you talk about custom groups. But this thing's basically just storing friendship connections. So between you and another user, there's probably going to also actually have to be a duplicate or reciprocal record going the other direction as well, actually. Okay, and then again, so we're first going to need to check whether or not Albert Einstein, who's trying to view the profile, is actually my friend. And then if he is, we're able to return all of the details with the friend visibility as well. If he's not, we're only going to be able to see this one and not the other one. And that would be in a where clause on the key range query that we're going to do. So first it's going to do this in step 1, and then in step 2 we're going to do the actual key range query that's actually going to fetch the account details. Okay, and then what is the partitioning key that we're going to want to do here? So I guess it can go either way. Yeah, okay. So you're doing from there where user is username and sort key is the... I guess it really can be either. think maybe in the timeline scenario there might be a scatter gather that we might need to prevent, where we might need to fetch. Oh, yeah. So if you're when you're building the timeline, it fans it out to all of your friends, and so you would want to fetch your account. So when you make a post, you want to fetch all of your connections. So you're going to want to do a key range query where this is the partitioning key. So this would be very useful for when you're doing the fan out of the timeline. Okay. It's going to fetch that, and then you can go ahead and get all of the things that they have appropriate permission for, and then you can go ahead and return those records over there. And then the translation to a more clean object can either be done here or just directly within the React.js code. It doesn't really matter. Yeah, so that was authorization was done on the server side, not the client side. One of the naive approaches would have been where you don't have this chunk. So I can show you the naive way to do it. It looks way more efficient, and because you might be thinking, hey, you know what would be really cool and save us a lot of logic is if we just go ahead and return the whole thing all the way to the user, and then they filter out what they can't see in the React.js code, so then it doesn't show up in the browser. So that's the naive approach, filtering in the browser. So definitely worth an honorable mention. That's totally a very easy because they can go ahead and just inspect the network tab on their browser's debugger thing. Yeah, okay. Public versus friend is the DB choice RDBMS or NoSQL? Yeah, so I was assuming very high volume here, and I worked at Amazon for like 3 years, so I'm going to tend to lean pretty heavy on DynamoDB. But you could even do manually sharded PostgreSQL. But the issue with that is that there's more overhead work that has to be done on handling the provisioning on your own. It's somebody from Google once called it a fool's errand to try and do manual provisioning and partitioning of your database. It's definitely a hassle. I've never had to do it myself, but I can just tell it's definitely a hassle, so you should try and avoid it whenever possible. I do have a couple of problems I've done in the past where it basically forces me to use that, but when possible, I'd prefer not to do that. So Cassandra also kind of works. I haven't really established whether it's write heavy or read heavy. It seems to me like it would probably be read heavy. I imagine people are viewing your profile a lot more often than you're updating it. And DynamoDB uses a B tree as opposed to an LSM tree like Cassandra. And B trees are a little bit more oriented towards they're a little bit more friendly with reads than LSM trees are. So that's another reason why I think DynamoDB is a little bit better. I don't know if that really makes a massive difference. I'm also not. I guess with one cool thing about Cassandra is that you of course have the tunable consistency level, and so then you can of course have it you can do sloppy quorums instead with Cassandra, and so then that would work kind of nice. But with DynamoDB, I imagine it's doing read replicas under the hood. And because it does support eventual consistency, and even though it's single leader, if you're doing eventual consistency, then that would mean there has to be read replicas, and so then you'd be doing your reads off those read replicas, and it should work just as fine as if you were to try to do the eventual consistency sloppy quorum on Cassandra. Is there anything else we could try here for the databases? I'm trying to be open to more things than just DynamoDB just because I use it so much. This is why. This is why I think it just happens to be the best tool for the job on a lot of occasions. And I was also just going to use that for this one over here. Actually, this one could end up being right heavy if we have to do that fan out. I'm currently having it structured in a way where it's not tracking. I'm assuming that we're not doing friends of friends. So this is assuming no friends of friends functionality. Otherwise, we do Cassandra. Yeah, I think Facebook probably has friends of friends support right now. I listed off both the different approaches though, and so this is probably not actually a reasonable assumption, but I have both of the approaches stated there, so I guess that's probably fair coverage of it. Okay, what else do we have in the chat? Using GraphDB would be an easy way to handle the relation DB. So I would recommend checking out the video that I did on the social graph problem. So longer term, here, I'm gonna paste that in the so graph DBs are actually really non-performant. They actually have scalability issues. So graph DBs like Neo for J actually. I'm gonna of course post a link to this file at the end of the live stream. So that's why I type these things out, and then I'm also kind of working on a website, and it's gonna go up on that website. It's systemdesignfightclub.com. And then there's the GitHub repository. The text files aren't up on systemdesignfightclub.com quite yet, but they are in the GitHub repository. Anyways, Neo4j actually has scalability issues. Some of them are, I heard it at least used to have a 1 billion node limit. It's the partitioning is actually I believe a premium feature. Partitioning is actually a premium feature, and then it's generally more oriented towards OLAP scenarios, and so it's the primary benefit of GraphDBs is actually the syntax. It has a special SQL syntax. The SQL syntax. Hold on. And that's written in DDIA, Designing Data Intensive Applications. Martin Kleppman actually did write about that. I think towards the end of chapter 3, it was in the chapter where he talked about the internals of B trees and LSM trees. He actually did talk about time series databases and graph databases. He said that it's actually really hard to represent the BFS style queries that you would kind of want to do in GraphDBs with regular SQL syntax. You have to do this like recursive query, and it's a huge pain in the ass. So that's the primary benefit of GraphDBs, is that it's really straightforward to write those in the special SQL syntax that it has. Otherwise, it's even if it was a little bit more performant, the fact that usually how you would do the friends of friends query is it would involve doing this really massive join operation and then scanning over hundreds or thousands of records, and that's called an OLAP query, as opposed to an OLTP query. And so usually on these user-facing things like this, where it's going to have like tens of thousands of TPS, you really do not want to be doing OLAP queries there. And so instead, it's best to try and do some kind of pre-compute. And I actually discussed this over in my social graph video, which is it's over in the live tab. I haven't swapped it over to the videos tab. It's something I did, I think, back in like January or February. And I talked about how GraphDBs, you can actually instead do this fan out and pre-compute trick. Very, very common thing that's come up before. But yeah, the primary benefit of GraphDBs is actually the special SQL syntax rather than any kind of performance boost. I've actually not even read about any kind of performance boosts of GraphDBs. I don't even know if Neo4j is columnar versus a B tree oriented thing. I would really bet that it's probably a columnar thing, which means that it's for OLAP use cases primarily, and you really do not want to have that externally facing. I even have coworkers that have used Neo4j before, and they've told me as well that they try to avoid allowing these user queries to actually have any direct involvement in making such a GraphDB query. They actually use, he did some kind of caching trick with Redis, so that when you have the query, it's already pre-computed what the results out of the GraphDB are, and so then instead of hitting the GraphDB directly, as often as possible, they already have it. The query already ran against the GraphDB, and it's just in the cache in Redis. So you want to actually avoid hitting those GraphDBs in the external user-facing scenarios. GraphDB may make more sense when we get into friends of friends ladder. And so that's again for friends of friends, the fan out approach from the video does go into how to avoid BFS style query. I can even kind of show, you know what, since it's already come up in 2 different questions, I guess I can go ahead and just get into it right now, since you guys are curious about it. So I'm going to go ahead and take this, and then so we're going to talk about, this is going to be the browser case for when an account owner adds a new connection. So when we have we have the friend add service. Okay, and so what you need is, so you're gonna do a key range query to you actually, yeah, okay, I know what to do here. Actually, I might botch it a little bit, but you're going to do a key range query to get all of your current friends, and you're going to want to have that, you're probably going to want to have a message queue, because this is going to be really expensive. What it's a fan out, like I said, it's a fan out, and that's going to be, it's a environment that's very friendly to having these partial failure scenarios. You're literally going to insert like 100 records or more, easily more than 100 records, and the server could have the power cycle in the middle of trying to do that, and there's not any failure recovery stuff built into servers typically like there are with DBs, where you have the write ahead log, the WAL. So instead you're going to want to get your friends, and you're going to store, this is just like the Twitter fan out, you're going to store it on here, and then you're going to have this fan out worker that's going to write all the friends of friends records. So we're going to have the task runner, and they're going to take in this. You're going to do this fan out of all the records, and I'm going to show you what I'm trying to describe here in the schema. So you would have a connection, type is friend, and so you're going to pull in all of the friends of Yubidesu, and so let's say that Albert Einstein is also friends with Stephen King, so you would also have a record from between me and Stephen King, and you're going to add, I meant Stephen Hawking, mix those up a lot, friend, actually it's going to take all of your friends, and then for each of those friends, it's going to grab all of their friends. It's going to see if there's already a connection between you and that friend of friend. And if there's not, oh, it's just for the connection being added. It's not for all of your friends. It's just for the connection being added. Okay. So you just added it. I just added a connection to Albert Einstein. So it's going to need to add that record. And then it's going to grab all of my friends and add Albert Einstein to them as a friend of friend, and all of Albert Einstein's friends and add me as a friend of friend. So then that would be on my side. This guy was a friend of Albert Einstein. It gets added there. And then it would also need to be, I guess it would only need to be on one side, or no, I could have friends that Albert Einstein doesn't have. And so you have to do it both ways, I guess. But then it's pre-computed. And so you would be able to avoid having to do that very expensive lookup of whether or not a person is a friend of friend at runtime during this part. You don't want to be able to try and figure this out while performing this operation at step 1. So that's why we're doing the fan out. And so it's going to be eventually consistent. It's really expensive. That's why it's going to happen asynchronously over here with the stream in the background. I might go into this. I might have, I haven't done this in a little bit, so I might have botched it just a little bit, and we can go ahead and go over it towards the end of the video. But that's the gist of how that works. Okay, I'm going to read through the chat. I can zoom out while we're thinking this over for a minute. Yeah, I can move this to, I guess there, keeps it kind of visible. No. There we go. Okay, GraphDB makes more sense when we add friends of friends. I saw they have the privacy model saying friend of friend, but not sure if it only checks one layer. Well, if you're ever trying to do friend of friend, it's you would have to do, you either have to do this fan out on the right side, or you would have to do a really expensive OLAP operation, and that would check hundreds or thousands of records on the read side. And since the system's probably going to be read heavy, it actually makes more sense to do it on the right side and do that fan out there instead, because that results in less work overall for the entire system. Can't be viewer service should call permission service directly instead of exposing permission DB credential. Hold on. Can't be viewer service should call permission service directly instead of exposing the permission DB credential. Okay, I kind of agree with what you're saying there. You can have it gated by its own. There could be a different. Yeah. So like these two DBs right here are probably actually going to be. Those are like very different problem domains, and so it's very unusual that they would actually be exposed directly to one service like that. And so you're right that there might be some kind of service gating them. What would make the most sense? So we would have this profile viewer service is kind of like what we're doing over here. We did have something named permission service. Hold on. Viewer service should call permission service. Oh, I see. Well, so I think that maybe the permission service, so these could be one service and they both own the profile details DB. Here, I'll go ahead and kind of spin this out a little bit. So I'm imagining that, so it's like the profile update service, the profile updating endpoint, and then you have the profile viewing endpoint. And so you might have those kind of owned by like one team. So I'm imagining it kind of like that. It's the read, it's the write side and the read side. What is that, CQRS? So I'm imagining it kind of like that. And then this is the friend service. So we have that like crazy fan out over there that we might need to do for friends of friends. And so I'd imagine that maybe that would actually be gated by the like friend service or something. You did have an alternative approach though, that it's maybe yours could also make sense too. I mean, there's a couple of different approaches to do everything, and I try to be open-minded about it. But you're right that there would most likely be some kind of pass-through layer kind of like this. Usually this kind of stuff is omitted in an interview. I, of course, am I'm, of course, not sticking to just the scope of interviews in most of my coverage, so I think it's totally fair game for me to talk about that, though. I usually don't, because it's like, these already go into like an hour or two. Okay, I'm going to move that out a little bit. There's a little variation. Also for the viewer scatter gather service query, same as below or something else here. Oh, okay. I definitely did want to write out a key range query or something for that. I was like, I don't know, it seemed a little straightforward, but it is fun to write those out. For the scatter, well, so we were actually trying not to do a scatter gather at all. You're good though. So it's this one. Select from user ID is that, and connection equals that. Yeah, so you would try and do, I would say, it'd be like, or from, it would be, oh, I didn't even name it. We'll say relation table because it's the relation DB. And it would be, oh, you could do count. You could just do count. Because then you're just checking whether it's a 0 or a 1. So count would work. I was thinking of just doing it like just star and then seeing if it's null or not. You might also actually need to know what type of connection it is in case it's like friend versus friend of friend. And so that's why you might want to do star instead, is if you need to have the type. So that's if you need to check. What is it? User UB so we have connection for Einstein, and then we have the type, and so that could be like friend. Like I said, friend of friend. You can even do like colleague. Colleague, or you could say coworker. That's like a thing. I think that was like one of those things that was kind of meant for is like you have groups, and then like you have a post that like is oriented towards like your coworkers. And then you have stuff that's more oriented towards like your friends from college or people that you went to high school with. So you can like manually add people to individual groups is what like I was kind of thinking of with the original extension up there where I had custom groups. Is I imagined that you would add the people to the custom groups like one at a time. and then that wouldn't require any kind of fan out, as opposed to friend of friend, which is special because it would actually require that fan out, because that actually changes the status of that person to everyone else that you are directly friends with. So you wouldn't have like, you don't have like friend of a colleague or friend of a coworker or coworker of a coworker. You only have this one special one that has a fan out, friend of a friend. You might want to see this type attribute for certain cases if you're going to do posts that have a specific type specified on it. And I'll circle back to this again when we get into that later variation. Looking at the chat for some other questions. Should we also store the mutual friend? Might make use case when a friend is deleted easier. Oh geez. You were right. That I didn't even think about the friend deletion case. I didn't even think about that. That would so there's other material out there that I think has covered like fan out stuff, and usually they just totally ignore the delete use case. That does actually look correct. The friend of friend only supports A to B, B to C as post seen by C. B to C, A's post seen by C. Not very familiar with OLAP. Does OLAP support longer? Well, so if you're, it looks like you're kind of doing the special graph DB syntax. So with graph DBs, instead of just doing plain old SQL, you're able to do these really crazy things where you can specify like, it looks kind of like this, and then you have like something that looks like that, and then you can say friend, and then maybe it's like star. I'm totally botching this. I've never written any. I've never had to actually write stuff, but this is like how you actually query like Neo4j, is that you have this okay, what was it? Stephen Hawking is trying to view my profile, and then it's me. So there's the first parameter, here's the other parameter, the person trying to view it, and then you have the attribute of how these nodes in the GraphDB are connected, where these are vertices in the GraphDB, and then you're saying arbitrary vertex right here. So that's how you kind of query the graph databases. What strategies should be implemented to handle where users change their visibility from friends to only me, particularly for newsfeed post for all friends have already been computed and cached? Well, so if it's just the profile and you're just changing the visibility from friends to only me, that would be pretty immediate in the lookup. For newsfeed, I guess that is okay. For the newsfeed, that is a challenge. Yeah. Okay. Maybe you would. So there's the post, and then you're fanning it out to this thing. So I guess whenever you update it, it would probably go through a fan out again, and then hopefully that fan out is idempotent. So the way that the fan out I think works is that you get this record that should look like, so you have the destination user ID, destination user. So let's say that Elon Musk sent out a tweet, and so it's going to end up on my timeline, and so here's my timeline, and then you have the tweet ID, and you'd have the tweet content, and this would be the partitioning key, because you're going to try and serve my timeline off of a single partition. So that's partitioning key. You've got some kind of tweet ID. Okay, you'd probably have a timestamp. Okay, and then the sort key is, it's probably going to be something like timestamp plus tweet ID. So you'd be worried about collisions for the timestamp. What if there's tweets that have the exact same timestamp? So it could be a combination of these for the sort key. I think you're able to do that. And so then maybe you would use this as part of the partitioning key. Maybe you would use this. No. You definitely need this as the partitioning key. You definitely need that as part of the partitioning key. And then it should be idempotent, and so you can overwrite it. So then you can have whatever other metadata. Like the originating user, which is Elon Musk. But so it would need to fan out again, and then it's just going to overwrite this. And so let's say he edits it so that it says, I am still Elon Musk. And so then you would just have the same exact thing go out, and it would say that. Or I guess you could have the permission. Well, so you wouldn't need the permission to actually stay in the tweet, but say friends of friends can see Elon Musk's tweet, and then he updates it so that it can be only his friends. So then the whole thing gets deleted. Like it's you would have it. You can have that in some kind of, in the write operation, can be a transaction or something, and so then when it sees like, oh, the permission is friends, or it can just go ahead and let it fan out anyways, and then you would have that it's, hey, you can't actually read this because it says friends on the record, and so that can still be done on the server side even though it did actually fan it out. That is interesting though. So I guess the most convenient way to handle that would be to go ahead and fan it out anyways, even if the permission wouldn't actually allow the person to be able to read it, because that would be the most elegant way to handle a update of the permission after you've done the original send of it. Yeah, that's interesting. FileThanks graph query seems include a search function inside. I think I did a better job of talking about it in the social graph video. I probably didn't. This is probably still pretty close, but that one I think I looked at it a lot more closely right beforehand because I knew I was going to have to talk about it. Need to add the potency key in a message. You always need to have the partitioning key in a message. You need a partitioning key when you're working with NoSQL databases. It's required for stuff like DynamoDB and Cassandra. All right, let's move on. Let's keep going with the agenda. So we got this variation we've talked about. We've kind of hammered it into the ground. We want to talk about what if we have other types of groups. I talked about type a little bit. I guess we can kind of go, I'll reuse this for the variation where it is, I'll reuse this for second part of this part of the variation. Yeah, this part of the variation. I don't know if I really need that. Okay, you know what? Yeah, I know what I'm going to do. We're going to take this, and we're going to do the custom groups scenario. the account details view, custom groups. Okay. And so you got these things on your timeline, on your account. So one of them is friends. Okay, and so we're going to say that this one is only visible to, we're going to do this one and we're going to say it's only visible to colleagues. And so we're going to need to be able to set a connection. We're going to say that we can now set a connection to colleague. So I can set this connection to him. He can have types, and it's going to be a list. So it's going to start with friend if I directly add a connection, and then I can go through my connections and add other specific things. So I'll say there's colleague. So the visibility is colleague only. And then he's also a coworker. I work with Albert Einstein, apparently. Okay, and I had the friend add service. So we're going to say that we have this, and then we're going to do updates over here. And so first one comes through, hey, I'm adding Albert Einstein as just a regular friend, and it goes ahead and it adds the friend part of the types. And then I'm going through my friends list later. I'm creating this colleague list. So I guess you could even have you could maybe even do a batch add of a whole bunch of friends from a list in the UI, and then it could maybe you would just pass it off. It'd stick it in a little thing. So let's say that I want to, we could have the request look a little bit like this. So we're adding a group, adding the group colleagues, and it's going to have, I'm going to pass it a list of group name, colleagues, and then we're going to have members, and we're going to pass it a list of friends. Say Stephen Hawking is my friend in this scenario. So we have that, it gets stuck on this, and we're going to put it onto some kind of broker, and then so this is for like adding a friend directly, or you could go ahead and add them individually, or if you're going ahead and adding a whole group. Actually, this is kind of a goofy idea. I kind of regret making this whole chunk right here. We should maybe just have that like split off, and I'm going to simplify this a little bit. But it was basically just going to be that you would have this thing fan it out over to the relation DB. But I was adding features that were not asked for in the original scope of the problem, and so that was just not smart. So we'd have to do 2 writes over here, and I'm splitting that off because again, if you're giving it a list of like dozens of users, that's a nasty partial failure scenario that can occur, and you would rather just have that happening asynchronously in the background. But again, that feeding it a whole list instead of going through them one at a time in the UI. That was not in the prompt. Instead, what I'd imagine is that you could just have the request look like, say that user ubidasu, and you'd pass it the whatever connection it is. So we'll say Albert again, and then you'll have type colleague, and then I would have to do a second request later on for Stephen Hawking as well, just like that. This is like a convenience thing. I shouldn't have gone into the weeds with that. That was a mistake. But there we go. Now we've got, and when you do these requests, so that one's already a friend. It just kind of it pulls the record, looks at it, so you can kind of do. I guess you would maybe need to do a read of the original record, and then you would update that record, and then you would go ahead and do the write operation. Maybe you can just do it as a transaction, but I mean this seems like it works just fine as well. The partial failure scenario is it's kind of graceful, so it's not like you'd end up in some kind of invalid state if this one goes through and then this one doesn't. It just means that you'd return a 50x or a 40x back to the client. They'd have to redo whatever button click they just did. Yeah. Okay, so that was custom groups for an account details view. Newsfeed, we already talked about that a little bit. We already talked about how the newsfeed gets fanned out. That's kind of in that's usually a different problem is the newsfeed itself. Yeah. So we have the profile details DB. Trying to think of what would be a good base for trying to write this off of. We'll go ahead and steal this one. So we got the account details view with just public versus friends, and then we got the extension where we have the custom groups, and now we're doing the newsfeed variation. And we're going to try and start with just public versus friends for those posts, and then we're going to try and show how the types will work, although it's probably already straightforward since I already kind of showed it with the previous approach for account level. So we're going to have the newsfeed view service. In this case, and we're going to have, all right, let's take this. Move that over there. Okay, so there's the newsfeed view service, and then there's the post service for writing a post. So you are writing a post, and that is going to go to a message broker. Your message immediately gets popped onto Kafka. Kafka says, yep, I got it. I got your post. And then you return a 200 success. It doesn't show up right away. It's instead going to need to do a fan out to everyone's timeline. There's also, of course, your profile view of the timeline. You can go directly to someone's profile and view it. So there's going to be that table, which is like, I think in grokking it called it like the user's cache or something. So I mean that's also going to maybe be important. I guess we could even have that just slapped right in front of Kafka, so it will show up right away on your profile, but having it show up on everyone else's timelines is going to take a little bit. And then we're going to have the fan out workers. Which are going to be over there. I guess I can go ahead and have the user profile, though. I like the idea of having that maybe done with a DB trigger. So instead of having it go right there, we're going to have it go into their like users cache view of the posts. I'm just going to call that the posts DB. That is only going to be for like profile level view of it, and then we would have a DB trigger from this thing that sticks it into Kafka, and then the fan out's going to be done a little bit later on. I'll label that with DB trigger just like that. Fan out worker is going to, I guess I can just delete that. Have it pull a message off. So if it's Kafka, it has to pull it off. I'm going to label it Kafka. Okay, and then it's going to need to look up all of your friends. Oh, so that's why we had the partitioning key of me. So we're going to need a relation DB over here. So it is going to pull a message. It's going to determine who all my friends are. And then it's going to fan it out to this like Newsfeed DB. So just people that are directly my friend from this more naive approach with just friends in public. So it's going to grab, let's say I have 3 friends, so it's going to write 3 records over here to this, 1 for each of my friends for their corresponding timeline. And let's talk about the schema for that. So me, UBSU, one of the connections is Albert Einstein. So we're going to pull up so it's Albert Einstein's timeline. There he is. And I didn't even talk about that one. I guess I can even, maybe it'd be easier to fill that out before I get ahead and fill out this one from downstream. So we have mine, and I'm making a post. We can maybe give it a post ID. DEF ABC 123 DEF ABC, and then I guess we're gonna have a timestamp 167.000 5000, and the content. Hi, I'm UBDESU. Okay, this one's the partitioning key. And this is the sort key. And if that's not good enough for you, if you think I can post multiple times per millisecond, you're also going to need to add the post ID to that primary key as part of the sort key. But I think we should maybe not allow that. We can maybe just have the new one overwrite the old one, because I don't know, allowing the users to post multiple times per millisecond seems a little absurd to me. You'd probably actually want to have like a rate limiter or something, so it should really kind of prevent that. That seems like it would be yeah, it should be rate limited. Okay, so there's our schema for PostDB. Again, I'm just feeling DynamoDB. You're probably still going to have more reads than writes. And again, it does honestly bother me a little bit that I throw DynamoDB at so many things, but I think it works great here. Anyways, it's going to go over here. So we've made our post, go on Kafka, we pull the message off, we're going to get all my friends, we have Albert Einstein, so it's going to do a write to him for his timeline. There's that. We're going to take we can just go ahead and take this whole thing, because he's probably also going to want to know who the poster is. He's probably going to want to know who wrote this thing showing up on his home feed. But in this case, the partitioning key is going to be him instead, because he's going to do a key range query whenever he wants to load up his timeline. And we want to serve that off of a single node. And we're probably going to sort it by the timestamp. And maybe we can have multiple posts on the same millisecond. So I guess that could probably be part of the primary key. Okay. Oh, we still haven't shown him actually retrieving it. And that would just be a key range query against the Newsfeed DB. Just like that. Okay, and we can talk about how to do this with custom groups. I'm going to read through the chat really quick. For celebrity, are we doing the fan out? We are, so that's a great call out. We are not going to dig into that too much. We're not going to dig into that in this video. I think I covered Twitter in a different video actually. Yeah, we're not going to cover it again in this video, but that's a great call out. It does do, I hope I covered the hybrid approach in that. I heard Twitter now does the hybrid approach, and so it does fan out for some people, but for the celebrities it doesn't do the fan out. Say a celebrity post is something set to public and then set to friend. Is it going to be fan out or rely on stranger to pull and then not be able to see the post? Say a celebrity post something set to public and then set it to friend. Yeah, so you can go ahead and, so like I said, we can go ahead and do some kind of overriding thing where, what was it? You said public and then friend. Okay. So I guess this would need, I guess even in this simplified case, you would still need to have a visibility. You would have it to public. And then, also if it's public, it's not going into people's timeline. It's not going to get fanned out if it's public because random strangers aren't going to have it in their timeline. I know there's like new stuff where you actually do see random posts from complete strangers, but to start with, we're not going to do that. I think that would be, yeah, I don't even know how to explain that. If you have random strangers showing up in your timeline, that means that they're at least doing some kind of personalization thing, and we're gonna talk about ways to kind of do that with the recommendation video this afternoon. I already have a personalized newsfeed video out from earlier in the spring, but I was just kind of getting familiar with collaborative filtering when I did that video, so that's why I kind of want to go over that stuff again. So if you're setting it to friends, it would only have to update here, and then that one would actually, I guess, go ahead and kick off the fan out. If you're going from friends to only me though, well, you know what, we can save how it can work for narrowing for the custom group use case. Okay, you've got a couple of other questions, but I want to keep going and make sure that I cover everything before the end of this since we're already an hour and a half in. So we're going to copy and paste this, and then we can go ahead and talk about the custom groups case. So now we've got the custom groups variation. Okay, so we have that. So let's say that it was actually at friend. Let's maybe add back in that detail about the permissions. How do I represent that in the other thing? There it is. Okay, so that's going to be how the relation DB looks in this variation. We're going to have the custom groups added back in, and Albert Einstein's going to have his own representation of those groups. So he might have no extra statuses over there. Then, so it's going to fan out. It would actually have, like we said, we would probably actually have the visibility over here. So it would be friend to start with, and then let's say that I did an update where I switched it over to colleague. Okay, and then let's say that I have another friend. We're gonna have Stephen Hawking come into the picture again. So we have Stephen Hawking. And Stephen Hawking is labeled as just friend in the way that I do permissions. So we have Albert Einstein's thing over here. We also have Stephen Hawking. All right. So what I'm thinking is that when we go back through and we do another fan out to my group of friends and we update these records to a visibility of colleague. Okay, and then I guess you would also need to know what types they have. Okay, and so then we would maybe want to have a hidden attribute. This does seem a tad excessive. Maybe there's a more simplified way of doing this that doesn't require so many fields. And so here you would have here's the range query that we're going to do. It's going to be select star from Newsfeed table, where we would of course want be Stephen Hawking's newsfeed. We're going to show how it gets filtered out. So be where user is Stephen. I'm gonna read the chat here in a couple of minutes. I think somebody sent something else. So where user is that, and we would have hidden equals false, and then we would maybe want to do order by timestamp like that. And so it would look similar for Albert Einstein's. So this one returns a record. While the other one does not return a record for the post. And you'd be able to figure out whether or not the hidden flag is set to true or false while you're doing that. It's part of the thing is it's part of the visibility. So visibility is colleague. That's part of the message over here. Okay, go through all the friends, and we're gonna have we would basically just have for this query it would be select star from relation table. Well, so you would have this thing. You'd add the hidden attribute. And so this one would be off of a case statement or something, but you'd inline the logic for setting hidden to true or false based on whether the visibility attribute, whether types contains the visibility attribute you want. So that should work. And it'll overwrite, and so it'll always fan out to all of your friends, which seems excessive, but that seems like it would work. Okay, I'm gonna read through the chat, and then we can see if there's anything else that I really wanted to cover in the. Did I actually label this? Yes, I did. There it is. That's the label. Come on, come on, come on. Okay, I guess that's fair for the label. Okay, say celebrity post something set to public and then set it to friend. Is it going to be fan out or rely on stranger to not be low? So can we talk about the cache info we need to store ahead of relation DB or cache info we need to store ahead of the relation DB and newsfeed DB? You mean in the posts DB? So so in grokking, this thing was called the posts cache, as if it's in Redis or something. So for Elon Musk, you would actually want to have that in Redis, and that totally makes sense. However, I think that there's maybe you wouldn't necessarily have a cache like Redis cache for all the users. So in reality, what I think it would look like is a little bit more like we can just go ahead and take this chunk. That's probably all we really need for trying to illustrate this. So I don't think every user is going to get a cache. It would just be some, and then on the DB trigger, I mean, you're probably going to have you probably have some kind of worker that's actually handling that DB trigger. So the DB trigger is actually going to hit a task runner, and it's going to check whether or not the user is actually a celebrity. And if it is, they get to go in the cache. Otherwise, they don't. And you would maybe add a celebrity flag for the user. You'd probably add a celebrity flag somewhere. And when they're fetching their timeline, you'd also want to check whether or not they are friends with any celebrities. And if they are, you're going to need to go ahead and hit the cache. So you've got your retrieval over here, and for the celebrity for the celebrity users, you're also going to need to hit this. Again, this is getting more into the weeds of how Twitter works. We're more focused on the privacy and visibility controls for this problem, so this is kind of out of scope. But I mean, it is interesting, and it's fun to talk about, and adding the privacy aspect to this does add an extra dimension of complexity for that problem. Privacy and visibility controls added to Twitter is it is kind of interesting. There's ways they can screw it up, like we saw with the naive approach somewhere up here. Yeah, it was this one. Yeah, so there are ways they can do it naively, but I think this is enough information for you guys. And we were storing the visibility flag direct. Yep, we did. Yep, we had that right here. So maybe you would just need to maybe have another hit against the relation DB prior to the check on the posts cache. And that would be how you get your proper authorization against the posts cache and filter it. So I guess you could even just have toss that in there. So it would be 1, fetch your timeline, generated the fanned out way, and then we're going to have 2, we've got the relation DB, and then 3, you can finally query the cache for the celebrities that you are following or friends with. and do that appropriately. Yeah. Okay, in DynamoDB, how is the key combined? Partition key plus sort key. How many sort keys can be combined together to make the entry unique? So that's a really that's a system design basics thing. I usually don't. There's a lot of really great books out there for that, and I'm going to direct you to them right now. Yeah, I got a resource for this. Hold on. Trying to pull up a window. There we go. I have this very nice compilation of resources that I've put together where for questions that are a lot more basic for people that are struggling to follow my problems, I put together this nice collection of books and useful resources for trying to learn some of this stuff. I'd recommend starting, so you should not just go out and buy all 20 of these books like overnight. Some of them are, particularly the ones over here, are not going to be super helpful if you're just picking up system design for the first time. I would recommend first checking out Don Martin's System Design Primer. It's free. It's just on GitHub. You just Google Don Martin System Design Primer. And he has a great overview of the basic concepts from there. I think Alex Shu's books are pretty great. I would Volume 2's a lot more thorough and deep than Volume 1. If you're just kind of learning about partitioning keys versus sort keys for the first time, I think you're going to find that in Don Martin's System Design Primer. Yeah, I don't know if Alex Shu actually went through the trouble of describing that in either of his books, to be honest. It's probably described in DDIA, but half of that book is really deep and really into the weeds of internals of databases, and then this one's even deeper than DDIA. So again, System Design Primer is probably the best place to start. And maybe you'd probably want to get Alex Shu's books for applied problems. So this is like applied interview problems. And then this one's a much heavier, it's like the Bible of system design concepts. It's explaining the concepts behind system design, while this one is like applied problems. So this is like LEET code, while this one is like the Corman Blue Book, CLRS. The Introduction to Algorithms book, where it tells you like how BFS works and stuff like that. While this one is like, Google interview question that requires BFS and stuff like that. Yeah, so I'd recommend that for stuff like that. I feel we have each user connection plus user plus connection plus friend to be a single entry, so when we update the type, we don't need to go through the type list. Oh, you're right. You could actually flatten that out. That is a different approach. Yes, you could either do a contains. Well, I don't know if a contains is really that crazy. I mean, so if you have a lot of different groups, that would totally make a lot of sense to just flatten out the list. I agree there. That's an alternative approach, though. I think that's also totally valid. I think that's also a great approach. Where's a great place for me to write out that schema? Probably here, or here. Okay, yeah. So you had the alternative approach where so for example, with this, you would instead write that as 3 records. And so you would have just a type of friend, and then you would have another one for colleague. Then you would have another one for coworker. And then I guess you would also have that as part of the sort key. That would probably be, or it could be, I guess it could be part of the partitioning key. If somebody has like a lot of friends, that would maybe be really useful, is to maybe have that as part of the partitioning key. But I think Facebook has a hard limit on the number of friends you can have, or the number of connections you can have. It's like a hard limit of thousands, 10,000 maybe. I guess if you're going through all 10,000 of your friends, if you literally have several thousand friends and checking each one for that contains thing, yeah, I guess your approach would be more efficient than that. It should, because then you can set this up as a secondary key at minimum, and it'll filter through it a lot quicker. For friends versus people that are in some much smaller subset, and that's maybe a few dozen records or something. All right, interesting. Partition key, though, I don't know if it necessarily needs to be a partitioning key. It should at least be a sort key. I don't know if it necessarily needs to also be part of the partitioning key. It can go either way, I think. But that is very interesting. I guess maybe there's one trade-off, is if you have like 5 different connection types for a person, and you are removing them as a friend and from all the groups entirely, it would kind of require deleting multiple records at once. I don't think that's really that big of a pain, though, for that alternative approach. I think that does kind of make sense, though. I do kind of like this approach a lot. Yeah, great idea there. I like it. Relation DB. Yeah, I think that's what I'm updating. This is the schema for the relation DB. I should really have that. This is getting a little bit more messy to follow. This one was the profile details DB. Is there any good material on capacity estimation? So for that, I would recommend in the SRE book from Google, it actually has a chapter on, it's called NALSD. I'm going to type that in the chat. NALSD, non-abstract large-scale design is the name of the chapter in the SRE book. And that actually does go through estimations a bit. Yeah, I can drop the link to this. I think that's a great call out. Yeah, that's the link to it. Okay, and I'm also going to post a link to the Excala draw right now before I forget. We are now wrapping up this this session, and so I'm going to drop a link to this because sometimes I literally forget for like a whole week. So I'm going to drop that right now in the chat. And I'm also going to put it in I'm going to edit the video and stick it in the description right now as well. And then we're going to go ahead and close this out. Killed it. It's in there. It's taking a while to save. I think we're good though. Thanks for joining. I appreciate it. I hope you guys enjoyed this as well. Yeah, I'll see you guys next. I'm going to do the recommendation engine video at 3 p.m. Pacific time in about 5 hours. So if you guys are in a time zone friendly for that, I'll see you guys then. Otherwise, I guess I'll see you next week. Thanks again for joining. Yeah, bye.